they're all on the river. And then, so every morning, when I was there last week, she said, the police go, they go, and she's back, and then I asked
Yeah, so she had conversations and she got 2.5 as well. So they didn't. So this time round they said, well, we're not listening.
but you can only have fish that much room. You can only have a certain number.
Well, no, you have to write on there and find and see if someone can give you a lift. No, but where do we know where it is? No, you'll have to ask questions. Yeah, because I mean, I won't be able to do it because by the time I finish work, by the time I get up, they've done it. So yeah. It doesn't say what time they'll get back. No, I think you just have to ask some questions, don't you?
Set it up.
Okay, all right. We have a timer this. Because I found myself spending. So, somewhere in the front, so
So welcome everyone. Is this mic is working? Maybe there's a bit of refer.
high technology.
Hello. Hello.
Yay.
Great. So thank you all very much for coming. And we're doing a double act welcome. I'm welcoming everyone from Friends of the CAM. And also to thank the Friends Meeting House for allowing us to use their space, which is lovely. Friends of the CAM are having a River Rights Declaration Festival on Friday on Jesus Green, so this is a plug for that. Hope to see you all there. The facilities are downstairs. Somebody may have seen those already, so toilets on the ground floor, women's to the right, men's to the left. And the fire exit, just in case it's needed, no fire alarms planned, is directly outside this door with a yellow sign on the front of it. So I think that's the housekeeping. I'd like to thank the candidates very much for coming and joining us today. And yeah, I think that's it. We have a poll on the way out, just to get you in the mood of polls, which Angie Carpin has set up. So if you'd like to you don't have to declare which party you're thinking of voting for, but just to indicate whether you've changed your mind. So there are some marker pens and a sheet downstairs on your way out. So again, welcome from Friends of the Cam.
And welcome from the Federation of Cambridge Residents Associations. We're absolutely delighted to be co-hosting with Friends of the Cam. I'm a member of the Friends of the Cam steering committee, along with other RA chairs. And I think this event celebrates actually what's best about Cambridge. I was just discussing this with the candidates in front, which is absolutely fantastic that they've all given us their time to come. There are a lot of issues of interest to Cambridge residents. We are, as an association, we are a source of mutual support, information, scrutiny, sharing links, sharing information across the city and with loads of friends and networks in villages and interest groups around Cambridge. So we're absolutely delighted to have this event. One of the things that we would love you to look at is the FECRA petition, which is about saving our talk streams, which is on everybody's chair. So please do look at it. Anyway, from now, I'd like to pass over to our wonderful chair, Mia Gray, Professor of Economic Geography. Over to you, Mia.
Lovely. Thank you. Technology there. I'm chairing today. I'm a professor of economic geography, nothing kind of physical, but it's a delight to be here with all our candidates today for the hustings. I have to say, I'm originally from California. I've lived here for decades, a long time, but we do not have the tradition of hustings. And I think it's a really fantastic tradition. I think there's so few forums where the public actually get to kind of question candidates and hear their responses and put them through their paces. I think it's so important to, as a form of local democracy, increasing transparency, increasing accountability, really fundamentally important. So it's a delight to be here and to see everyone here and to see such a fabulous range of people here too. So what we'll do today is I'll start with a few questions that the organization has already given me just to get us going, and then I'll take questions in groups of 2 or 3 questions, and then each candidate will have time to answer, 2 minutes. What I would ask, an hour and a half will go very quickly. So I ask that everyone kind of try to keep their questions pithy and succinct, and I also ask of the candidates to try to give as succinct answers as you're able to. Some of these issues are very complicated, and they're not always they don't always lend themselves to quick answers. Can I ask everyone also to follow some ground rules today, and that is really about kind of respect for each other and the candidates, and kind of active listening, and actually creating a good atmosphere is fundamental to how these things function. So if I could ask everyone to do that. And I want to start with a question for the audience, and that is, can I have just a show of hands to see how many people have still not made up their mind about who they're voting for? Oh, quite a few. Okay, good. That means there's a lot to play for. All right. So I've asked each candidate to introduce themselves and to give 3 minutes really to tell the audience their vision for the future of Cambridge. Cheney, would you like to start us off?
Sorry, can I just say, if anybody's tweeting, #United
Vote Cambridge. Great. Thank you, Wendy.
Definitely the best thing to vote for. Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be with you tonight. I think my story here in Cambridge is probably quite a common one that will be known to many of you, in that I wasn't born here, but moved here as an undergraduate to Newhall or Murray Edwards College, so I can avoid showing my age too much. Finished my degree and then realised I couldn't find any particularly good reason to make the trek back to hilly, soggy Derbyshire. So spent a year in this lovely place working in special needs education, and then went on to become a teacher, and I've now been teaching in Cambridge schools for 13 years, and I've been a city councillor in Castle Ward here for 6 years. And so when I think about the growth of Cambridge and what the future of Cambridge will be like, what I think about is so many similar stories of people who move here, fall in love with our beautiful city and make it their home. And so my vision for the future of Cambridge is a city which doesn't just thrive now, but continues to thrive for years to come. The bedrock of any functioning society for me is not in its tech or its research. It sits in its public services. It's the people who work every day in our hospitals, our schools, our shops, and with our elderly. Traditionally, and still today, they are often amongst the lowest paid roles, and we see in Cambridge inequality becoming entrenched because the people who perform those vital roles often can't afford to live in the city and amongst the communities that they serve because the cost of housing is simply so high. So for me, what we plan for how Cambridge will change over the next 12 months, and we face challenges ahead, I think we also need to think about what we will need in 30 or 50 years' time, which is a thriving public sector. And that means we need to start thinking now about how to make sure our housing is affordable and our city is well connected so people can live near to where they work. I'd also like to see Cambridge is green, with lots of bugs, hedgehogs and worms. And it's been really interesting as a councillor to see examples of how urban greening and promoting biodiversity has been used in new developments. I'm thinking, for instance, about Trumpington. I can see Philippa here tonight, and Eddington, where actually we've seen that the right combination of pollinators and careful management of the verges and waterways can create spaces in urban areas which actually promote almost better habitat for our insects and small mammals than barren open fields. I think we need to learn lessons from what's worked well here and what hasn't, so that Cambridge in 30 years' time has streets lined with trees, verges covered in wildflowers, and bee blocks in every home. So my vision for Cambridge is ultimately one where we're in charge of our own future. We'll talk a lot tonight, I'm sure, about whether Cambridge should grow and where it should grow, but for me, how it grows is equally important, and I think it's vital that Cambridge has the right to determine its future itself. That's one of the reasons why the Liberal Democrats have resisted Michael Gove's proposals for a development corporation, which would take those choices out of our hands and put building lots of houses in Cambridge somewhere into what may well be Keir Starmer's quite large inbox after the general election. For me, those plans risk a whole load of government interference, with probably very few houses, no schools, no GPs, and no shops to show for it. Something that 6 years of working with Cambridge Residents Association groups has taught me quite quickly is that in Cambridge we're quite good at getting things right ourselves and working hard and collaboratively to do that. So for me, the vision for Cambridge is one that I hope we here can craft together. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane, you want to go next?
Thank you. I'll stand up as well. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shane Manning, and I'm the Conservative Party candidate for Cambridge. Now, it won't escape anyone's notice that the population of Cambridge has grown massively in recent years, and it continues to grow. Over 10 years ago, a forecast was made that the population of Cambridge would hit 147,000 by 2031. Friends, we hit that milestone in 2021. Now, as much as that's exciting in many ways, and it's a real tribute to our city that so many people want to live and work here, the speed and scale of that growth is causing challenges, particularly around housing and congestion. With housing, we have too few, and they're too expensive, as has already been mentioned. And on congestion, our roads are too busy and too dangerous. Now, the next MP for Cambridge, and indeed the next government, need to have a clear plan for the long term and be willing to make bold decisions in order to give us a secure and sustainable future. Now, the Conservatives over the last 10 years have invested millions into Cambridge, and I think it's over 500 million just into investment projects alone. So we've shown our commitment to the future prosperity of the city, but we need to do more. On housing, frankly, we need to build more homes in and around the city. I know that's not always popular, but we do. And we need to make sure that those who want to buy a home can do so affordably. Now, this government have built over 2.6 million homes since 2010. And as part of our manifesto, we've made the bold pledge to build another 1.6 million over the next Parliament, but crucially, only with local support and in the right places, which I don't think is something that Labour is committed to. They're going to build regardless of what you think. But on the affordability side of things, we've done a lot too. We're cutting people's taxes so they have more money to spend to get that all-important deposit. And we're also abolishing stamp duty for first-time buyers up to the £450,000. This will transform the housing market and help hard-working families get on the property ladder. On congestion, we need a balance of short and long-term solutions. Short-term, we need to encourage those who are willing and able to walk, cycle and use public transport to do so by making sure that the infrastructure is there to make sure it's safe to cycle, that it's efficient to use a bus and that a bus will take you where you want to be. But longer term, whereas I think that Labour and Lib Dem GCP are just happy to build more buses, we're more ambitious than that. We have a strategic plan to build a light rail network across our city, which research shows that it's not only the best way to make a modal shift, so moving people away from cars, but it's also going to truly transform the way people get around our city, and it's better for the environment too. So just to wrap up, and bear in mind I'm close to time, my vision for Cambridge is that we have more affordable homes for hard-working families that are from Cambridge and want to live in Cambridge. My vision for Cambridge is to make sure that we have long-term strategic transport infrastructure that matches the ambition, the potential and the dynamism of Cambridge. And lastly, my vision for Cambridge is that the hard-working people of Cambridge benefit from the growth and the success of Cambridge. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the independent candidate, David Carmona, and you've come to hear about our vision for Cambridge. Is that correct? For the future? So I'm going to give you a slightly controversial one. Ready? Okay. So for a start, I think there's too many trees in Cambridge. There's trees and grass everywhere. Wherever you go, wherever you turn, they're always there. Grass, birds, insects, butterflies, gemflies, pig's mayflies. Chirping and buzzing all over the place. They're in the center of the city, on the outskirts, in every ward, even in people's gardens. It's grim. And they're completely useless. They're a waste of space. So my vision of the future of Cambridge is of a city where we finally shove some of those trees, I would say even all of those trees, and the grass too, out. Let's invite developers, any developers, good or bad, I don't care, to build tens, no hundreds of thousands of houses. On the green belt, on the grey belt, and on the yellow belt, I don't care what you call it. They say there's not enough water. We can ration water. What's the problem? Half a glass a day, a 2-minute shower every month should be more than enough for most people. And if you want more, you can nip down to Tesco's and buy a bottle of mineral water. Another thing I don't like is poor people. You see them all over the place in this country. They're horrid, with their cheap clothes, second-hand cars, and missing teeth because they can't afford to go to the dentist. Luckily in Cambridge, there aren't any poor people. Or at least we keep them well out of sight. Out of sight, out of mind. Hopefully, thanks to our city's high property prices and the prices of the premium investment homes we'll be building to replace the trees, those poor people won't be able to get a foothold on the property ladder. And we'll be short of them. This is a rich, middle-class, academic city. We don't need poor people here. Well, maybe a few of them, a couple of thousand here and there. You know, to do the cleaning, the gardening, deliver the takeaway meals. work in the shops, repair the streets, do some building work, and help us recover should we ever go to the hospital. But they should keep out of sight when not needed. And then there's old people. They just take up space and resources, and they're pretty useless, especially the ones who are weak and infirm. And frankly, we have more important things to think about than caring about weak and infirm people. We have to develop the city. We have to save up to buy bigger toys. So let's shunt those oldies into the arms of a few private sector care home operators. They'll know how to deal with them. Let's build Cambridge into a city of 1 million people, with gated communities to provide wealthy residents protection against crime, and out-of-town shopping centers and skyscrapers. I'd like to see a skyline, Manhattan on the can. Skyscrapers full of foreign students and life science laboratories, generating income. Our metropolis will be a model for cities of the future. I'm sure you'll all agree with this, all of you. But just in case, hands up anybody who doesn't agree with this. Thank you.
So, anyone else?
Hi everybody, I'm Sarah McManus and I've been an active and proud member of the Cambridge and South Cambridge Green Party for about 10 years. So elections are all about stories and messages. And I don't know about you, but I prefer my stories when they have a bit of truth in them. Maybe some facts and some evidence. So here's some facts about the future of Cambridge. What do we know about the future of Cambridge? We know, first of all, fact one, without urgent action, Cambridge will run out of water as early as 2029. We will go to the tap and nothing will come out and it will be horrifying. So that's in about 5 years. Fact. Fact two, this water source shortage is caused by global heating, which is caused by carbon emissions, which is caused by humans. Just get that in there. Fact three, 99% of Cambridge's water supply is from chalk aquifers and other groundwater sources. Fact four, developers can no longer demonstrate water neutrality for Cambridge's growth projects. And fact five, the proposed solutions, which are the Fens Reservoir and the transference from Grafham Water, these proposed solutions won't be ready by 2029 when we make our journey to the tap. The Fens Reservoir is not going to be ready until 2035 and Grafham Water not till 2032. So, fact six, the clear message is Cambridge is past the point of sustainable growth. Okay, we're already there. And yet, we hear stories about growth everywhere. Okay, it's still nationally Angela Rayner talking about, from Labour, talking about growth all the time. Obviously, Michael Gove, we're all still traumatised when earlier in the year he had announced his Goveopolis plans for 150,000 houses. I mean, that really traumatised the people of Cambridge. Locally, we have a local plan which has been endorsed by Cambridge City Council and South Cambridge District Council of 49,000 houses there in the local plan by 2040. Okay? So these are not common sense stories for Cambridge. They're just not. It's simple maths. The current demand for water in Cambridge does not match. It's greater than the groundwater supply available. So what we need now, right now, today, well, probably quite a long time ago, is some truth and honesty. And I think the most productive way that we can spend this evening talking about the future of Cambridge is to put growth aside and focus on how we're going to sort out our groundwater emergency. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Daniel Zeichner. I'm the Labour candidate in the election, and I've been very honoured to represent most of you for the last 9 years. And thank you, Mia, for chairing the session again tonight. Look, my vision for Cambridge is an ambitious one. I think we should aim to be the best small city in the world. And that sounds like a grand aspiration, but why shouldn't we be? It's a fantastic city already. But frankly, and we may want to discuss what the best small city in the world, what characteristics it would have, I can say straight off, I think it would need to be a city with less inequality. And sometimes people say to me, well, what will the MP do? And what I would say is, it's got to be a team effort to do this. So I try and work with all our local representatives. We have a complicated governance structure, as I think many of you are aware, in this part of the world. But if we're going to create a great city for the future, it's going to need all the actors working together, including the institutions in the city and civic society, much of which is represented here tonight. So a much less divided city. There are some ways in which that can happen. I genuinely believe that Labour's New Deal for working people will make a difference. For people who are on insecure contracts, there are too many people in the city who don't know how much money they're going to be earning by the end of the week. It's absolutely got to be an environmentally sustainable city. Last week's hustings, which some of you will have attended, I talked about Great British Energy. I think it's a hugely ambitious task to decarbonise the power sector by 2030, but that will be part of, and massive amounts of home insulation available in this city. We used to have schemes. I'm afraid they've fallen away over the last decade. That can be reversed. Absolutely, the housing and planning system is crucial, particularly for young people. I think generational unfairness in this country now is a very, very big problem, which is having wider consequences which people haven't fully understood yet. So absolutely rebalancing the opportunity in favour of younger people. So when new housing comes along, this is what Labour is promising, that it will be local people and young people who have the first opportunities. And then, of course, in Cambridge, it's got to be a transport system that will work for the city. And again, I'm sure we'll talk about that further tonight. It's a controversial subject, but we cannot have that world-leading city. We don't have a world-leading transport system to work. So everybody in this room tonight loves Cambridge. It's a wonderful place to live in for many of us. But sadly, for some of our fellow citizens, it's really quite a difficult place to live in. And frankly, it's also been a difficult place for everybody to live in the last few years, with many of the transport schemes that have been underway. And I suppose my big promise to you is to try and make sure that if there are improvements in future, we get the transport improvements for people who live in the city, as well as people who are being moved in and out of the city, because I think people have had a pretty hard time over the last few years. So that's my goal, the best small city in the world, and if we're going to achieve it, it's got to be good for everyone.
Can you hear me? So my name is Dr. Khaled Abutaim. I'm an oncology consultant. You can see I just came back from the hospital. I was trying to cover my clinic and my two colleagues' clinics as well. One had to travel and the other one on sick leave. But here we are. So I'm oncologist by training, as I said, and I'm political advisor as well. Why I'm standing? I'm standing here for many reasons. One, I learned honesty, and this is why I'm standing. We are really facing problem here in the city. And always when I talk to my patients about chemotherapy, about what we are going to do, mainly the patients with stage 3 and 4, we have to be very honest where we are. The city really suffer, I can say, stage 3 type of cancer. We are really facing big problems. If we are talking about 9 years of the labor here, and this is the city center, horrible roads. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. My mom coming from Bethlehem, I born in Dubai. I'm doctor, all my sisters, doctors as well. At home, we really love our work. We are honest, and this is what will build the trust. I will not accept to see my lovely city, Cambridge, like this. I will not accept to see my city suffering from roads like this. 9 years, nothing done. When we are going to do something? Another 5 years? I would like to show you something. This is the St. Luke Church. Can you believe it? Have a look, go visit the church. My lady, she's Polish, very Catholic, and she's shocked how the churches here, how the city treated. Yes, outside the city, lovely new building, lovely new houses. For sure, not for your kids, not for you, for very rich people, 700 plus, 1 million plus. So what we need to do here, we need to work together to save the city, the roads, the environment, our rivers suffering from pollution. My apologies if I will be very, or a little bit negative, because I'm facing trouble here. This is Cambridge, as you can see, and all Kingsland. I used to work in Kingsland as a consultant there. It's going to sink soon under the sea level because of the climate, because of the weather. If we don't do anything now and protect the city, all these beautiful houses, which is not for us, not for our kids, going to sink. What we need to do here, we need to act now. There is a science of reading the future. Before we build, we have to think about the consequences of this building. Where is the sewage going to be? Where is the water coming from, as my colleague said? I had a letter saying, when I moved to Cambridge a few years ago, saying, oh, don't drink the water. I got 2.5-year-old, I got 5-year-old, sorry, like this. And I stopped him from drinking water. Why? Because polluted. So there is, in the south of the country, there is parasites in the water. So I can't tell my patients to drink water. I used to tell them drink 1.5 liters, 2 liters to survive a day with the chemotherapy. But now I have to tell them boil the water. So we have pollution. They are talking about E. coli in our water and rivers, more than the normal levels anywhere. We have to act now to save our future. If we don't do anything now, I think we are going to stage 4. This is not Cambridge what we know it. This is a very historical, unique city. Believe it or not, the A&E size is smaller than Harlow Town. The train station is smaller than Harlow Town. So basically, the services here, not for the city, for a smaller city. So how are we over-expanding? We have to review each plan. We have to control it by our citizens, by our workers, and our councillor. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, thank you, everyone, for your opening statements. So the Federation of Cambridge Residents Association and the Friends of the CAM have provided the first 2 questions, which I will read out. So we'll start with our first question. Given that growth is constantly being promoted as a panacea for many of the issues facing both Cambridge and the wider economy, and is universally considered a good thing by the main political parties, for how long do candidates believe the problem of growth can be solved with further growth? And can they produce any examples where growth in Cambridge has benefited local residents, either in terms of affordability of everyday living or improvements to the natural and built environment? So, Daniel, can I have you start us off?
Yes, certainly, because I suppose I'd say, what is the opposite? We've seen over the last few years the economic problems that have stemmed from a stagnant economy in this country. We've seen inequality rising. We've seen exactly the problems I've already mentioned about the difficulty that young people find finding affordable housing, not just to buy, but to rent in this city. So the choice is, and I absolutely accept it, there is an academic argument to be had about growth versus not growing, but certainly it's the Labour Party's view, it's my view too, that sustainable growth, and perhaps that's the bit that we've not been talking about enough, sustainable growth is the way in which we can tackle some of these issues. Now, in terms of improvements in Cambridge, maybe I'm going to make myself a bit unpopular here, but I think there are plenty of things in Cambridge that actually have improved over the last 20, 30 years. I remember when I first came here as a student in 1976, I think back to, I do not think that the station development has been an inspiring example of architecture, but I do remember the heaps of bicycles that used to be strewn around that area, and I actually think it's better having a secure, even if it's not quite sometimes secure enough, bike park there for 3,000 bicycles. And although, as I say, I'm not sure it'd be quite my style of architecture, I think Station Square is better than what we had before. So I'm afraid I don't take this pessimistic view that we can't do things better in future, we can't grow the economy in a sustainable way. And I think if we're going to tackle the inequality that I've already mentioned, that is the way to do it.
Thank you. Sarah, you want to go next?
Okay, so sustainable growth, I would argue that that's an oxymoron at this point. Any term that is, any positive word that is matched with growth, good growth, even green growth, we have to let that go now, because that's the wrong story to be following. As Greens, we feel it's our responsibility to argue to become agnostic about growth and leave it in the past where it belongs. It's taking us down the proverbial without a paddle, quite literally. So we believe, also in terms of the second part of the question, has it benefited local residents? I don't see how growth has benefited local residents. If you think about the average house price, it's astronomical at the moment. Just even to rent a room in Cambridge, it's £600 a month, and we can't. I came here in 2002. I didn't come as a Cambridge student. I came here to train as a teacher, and I found it immediately difficult in Cambridge. But and I loved the fact the second day I was here, I got a bicycle, but I couldn't afford to be here. And it was, so many times I've thought about moving back up north because, to get onto the housing ladder and to even just get into the city centre, I don't know, with a taxi, it's very, very expensive. Also, in terms of transport, housing, it's not easy to live here. It's just not easy to live here. And I know lots of other people who've left Cambridge because they can't afford to be here.
Thank you. Is that better than that one? Great. Khalid, do you want to go next?
Thank you. Now, there is I love to mix between medicine and politics because medicine is my specialty and politics is my hobbies, and I'm advisor in politics. Now, there is a benign growth and there is a malignant growth. What we are facing here, to be honest, is a malignant growth. When you have overgrowth the city and the people suffering, there is not enough transport, the roads down, the A&E is very small, it's for a small city. How come you are over expanding the city? Number two, can our council, can our city look after the new area? No. So sometimes I'm questioning, to be honest, I'm asking myself, who is running the city? Because if you go down to new areas, it's run by big companies. What I need here, I need the people, our workers and councillors to control these areas, not companies. We are not we are workers, we are the citizen here, but who's controlling the new areas is companies. So we have to obey their own laws. I don't know if in 5 years, 10 years, they will charge us extra fees, and the council and the city can't say anything. In my area, for example, Darwin Green, if there's any problem, if I call the council, no, sorry, nothing to do with us, call XYZ company who's running the place. Any grass problem, any issues, no, nothing to do with us. What about if we had a problem with them, which happened when the biggest foundation scandal in the history of UK happened in Darwin Green, next to my window, 84 houses being demolished. Look to the pollution. What investigation done? What fines done? Zero. Because what? council, nothing. We don't have enough people to investigate. We don't have people to look to see what's going on. So we have to give more power to our citizens, to our councillors, to control. Eddington, there is lots of, it's now dirty, some areas is not safe, and my apologies, I'm cutting the line. So here we are. So we need more control for our citizens over these companies. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane, you want to go next?
I can't believe I'm going to start this by agreeing with Daniel Jaishner that I think growth is important, and there's a reason why people think that. There's only 3 ways that we can actually pay for the public services that we all rely on. That's to raise taxes, which I think most parties agree are too high at the minute. It's to cut things, which nobody wants to do, and it's to grow the economy. So we've got 3 choices, and then growth is the least bad option. And ultimately, it's easy to say growth isn't benefiting me if you're doing well from life already, but there's millions of people who rely on growth to buy their first homes, to improve their quality of life. And ultimately, the only way that we're going to improve people's quality of life is by growing the economy. You talk about what things have people benefited from in Cambridge. Well, just look at the nearby Adam Brooks Biomedical Campus. That's a world-leading facility. That's only been possible from the growth. And they're actually, and under this Conservative government, we've built 2 brand new train stations. We're building 2 brand new hospitals, which I'm sure everyone living in the city will benefit from. I would say Sarah's absolutely lovely candidate, as we've got to know each other recently, but I'm absolutely depressed by her idea that growth is a bad thing and we need to strive to somehow degrow. Like I said, I think that's something easy to say when you've got everything already. It's much harder when you're a low-income family struggling to make ends meet and you're relying on that growth to be aspirational, to have more from your lot. So I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to add to the depression, but I think growth is key. It's a no-brainer. And as I said, if you want to pay for all the services that I'm sure every single one of us relies on here, you either raise taxes, you make cuts, or you grow the economy. And I know which one I prefer.
Thank you. Cheney, you want to go next, and then David. Okay. Just to remind everyone, the mic is on, so they were saying if everyone can just not press the button, but assume that it is on. Okay, that's all right. All right.
Okay,
Cheney.
thank you. I find this word growth quite a tricky one, because I think the word growth, actually using that, masks a whole number of issues underneath it. And I think for me, it's more helpful to actually talk about the issues rather than blame it all on growth when none of us quite know what that means. When I think about growth, what I think about is people. When I think about the issues in Cambridge, I think about the challenges that people face. One of those is inequality. Cambridge is often said to be one of the most unequal cities in the UK, which is absolutely terrifying, and we have to do something about that. And a big part of that is making sure that people have availability of jobs in their local area. And actually, I think it's quite right that our children should be able to work and continue to live in the city that they're born in. If we stop creating those jobs, where do those people go? We also need to ensure we have affordable housing, and ensuring supply meets demand isn't the only part of that, but it's a huge part of the picture. We talk about our city being riddled with congestion and the pollution it causes, which is probably one of the biggest issues that residents talk to me on the doorstep every day. But one of the reasons for that congestion is because people have to travel in and out of the city to get to their place of work. If we address public transport, if we made sure that people actually lived within the communities that they serve so they can walk or cycle to work, we'll be able to solve that problem. We talk about sustainability and the challenge of the environment, and quite rightly so. But I would argue, let's not just blame it on growth, let's think about what we can also do. What's our responsibility towards that? Something I'm very proud the Liberal Democrats have done within the City Council is brought forward grey water recycling within all new council homes, which vastly reduces the water bills, but also the drain on the aquifer. So we can take forward those ambitious measures to make sure that we're doing right here. In terms of examples where growth has worked, I'd point you towards Eddington, which is in Castle Wards, where the City Council worked really hard with the university to make sure it was green, that there was affordable housing. And a fascinating statistic there is that if that huge development, only 1 in 5 residents have a car, because they've been positioned really carefully in the area that they work. So I'd argue it's hard, but it is doable, and we need to be bold enough to address that rather than put our head in the sand and expect it not to happen to us, because if we don't manage it well, it will.
Great, thank you. And just to time, David.
the three biggest parties here are all recommending growth. And this is the problem at the moment. The problem in Cambridge is that Cambridge is like a goose that lays golden eggs. It produces a lot of value added through the businesses that come here, the science, etc. And this is useful for the government for tax income. I understand that it's good to redistribute tax income around the country, but to some extent you have to think about the people here. And when you look at a city that's growing in a breakneck way in order to basically generate wealth for the rest of the country, there should be something in it for the people who live here as well. In fact, the people who live here, I would say that the local people in any place should be the people who are considered first, before thinking about all the people who might want to come to Cambridge to buy a new house. And most of the properties that are being built, there is council flats, there is affordable properties, but most of what's being built is being built to attract people, relatively high-income people, or people who work in high-income businesses. It's not being built for the citizens who live here. And the fact that you build more and more homes doesn't mean that the prices go down. Yeah? And the fact that you bring more and more wealth in a city doesn't mean that the city gets wealthier. We can see what the result is. When I go around, I meet a lot of people who are not very wealthy. I meet a lot of homeless people, and I see a lot of wrecked infrastructure. I'm not saying our city is bad, by third world standards, we're great. Yeah? But let's think a bit more about the people who live here, and then we can grow. The other thing that I think about is, if we want to have science in the UK and growth, why don't we distribute it to other locations in the UK? Why does Cambridge have to be the only one at the expense of the people who live here? That's it.
Thank you. Great. Thank you all. So lots of issues have come up there. Generational unfairness, sustainability, corporate power, who benefits, inequality, water issues, public sector issues, lots of different things. Some of this we'll get to with our second question here, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. The second question is also about growth, but it brings in Cambridge's water supply. It says, the greatest growth is being proposed in one of the driest places in the UK. Currently, 99% of Cambridge's water supply comes from chalk aquifers and other groundwater sources, which are already over-abstracted and drying up. The Environment Agency says it's not possible to have major growth in this region without harm to the environment, and is now objecting to developments such as Bourne and Darwin Green on the grounds that there's not enough water. Do you think that these and other major developments should go ahead regardless, and that economic growth should take priority over the environment? So, Sarah, would you please start us off?
Okay.
Sorry.
The intro to my... Can you hear me? Yeah. On the microphone? Okay. Speak up. Not through the microphone. Speak up.
Right now.
Hello? Speak up. Okay, just speak up. Okay. Okay, so this is going back to the growth question, and it's going back to economics and how we frame ourselves in the world. So the Greens believe that we should be becoming more eco-centric. So putting, I believe there's also, amongst all these crises of the climate crisis, housing crisis, the crisis in our NHS, there's this behavioural crisis that's going on as well. And we believe that we're somehow above ecology. We believe that we've become disconnected from nature, and this is the problem with where we're going, and that we're still banging on. There's still people at this table talking about growth now. We need economies that make us thrive, whether or not they grow. There is proof in the world of countries that are already doing this. How do you explain a country like Iceland, which is, it's 106 in terms of GDP, so you've got the USA and China, number one and number two. Iceland, in terms of HDI, so this is the UN measurement, it's called the Human Development Index. You probably know about this. It's not as sexy as GDP, I guess, but it's a measurement that's based on how much education a person's expected to get, how long the life expectancy at birth, and also the gross national income per capita, so per person. So it's about standard of living, okay? So up there you've got, the usual Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland is number 3. So this is proof that, so this is high HDI, good standard of living, and low growth. We've got countries like America, which is number 1 there, but the life expectancy in America is 10 years lower than many other countries on that list. And the UK, you won't be surprised to know this, but we've been talking about inequality a lot. At this end of the table, we've been talking about inequality a lot already. The gross national income in the UK is much lower than other countries as well. So so we need to really examine how we're measuring how well we do in a country, and that is key to our survival in the future as well. Thank you.
Khalid, would you go next, please?
If we're talking about the water supply and the growth, there is 2 points here. One, we need really to look for sustainable water supply. And I can say the previous, or the Labour Party for now 9 years, there is no solution. Now, the future war, if we talk about politics, or if you read for politicians, and writers, they will talk about the future war is all about the war for drinking water. So what we need to do, we need really to find a real solution. This is the reason why over-expanding the city, overbuilding, and without any water supply, without any resources for water is really dangerous for the city. When we're talking about homeless, I think there's a point. When you have extra 15,000 new built house, take in mind, from these 15,000 new built house, there is at least 1,000 person will not be able to pay his bills, so he will be homeless because of the cost of living. So the number of homeless people as well will go up. The number of patients, cancer patients, who need medical attention will grow up. So basically, the city is very poor to face all this disaster: the water supply, the medical needs, the homeless, number of homeless people. Already there is a queue of all over the country, 100,000 people waiting for a house, and really this is the reason why over-expanding Cambridge is really dangerous. We already facing pollution to our water. We are already facing problems here and there. So we have to review each plan before we decide, yes, go ahead or no. Each plan, even what we signed contracts with, and we need to know what contracts we have signed already with the previous companies. For how long this contract, what this contract means for the citizens. So this is all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheney, if you could go next, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the question. I think for me, I'd argue that I'm not sure it has to be one or the other. So Cambridge already has a very ambitious local plan in terms of housing, and that's drawn up between Cambridge and South Cambridge district councils. And the council is set housing targets by the government, who say, given the projected growth in this area, the projected number of jobs, this is how many houses that you'll need to build. Now, we've drawn a red line in the sand for the first time ever in our local plan, and we've said that unless the government ensures the water supply by providing a new reservoir even, and a new pipeline, we just can't do that. So that red line there is drawn, that gauntlet has been thrown down. And what I think we're seeing here, and the fact we even have to have these terrible conversations about can people come to live here because of the water, is a result of successive government failure to ensure that infrastructure is there. The projected number of jobs in Cambridge and the development is not suddenly a surprise that's crept round the corner. We've known about this for a long time. So what I really hope Daniel will be able to talk to us about tonight is what he's been doing over the last 8-9 years to make sure that one of the first things a new government does is build that reservoir for us very, very quickly. The other thing that I would say amongst there is that I think we do need to look to ourselves to some extent as well. So we also have to take a responsibility. I mentioned grey water recycling, which is something that I think the council, and there is a role here for the Member of Parliament for Cambridge, to be really championing measures
of retrofitting and installing that grey water recycling at scale and making that more affordable and more possible. But I'd also ask a simple question. Can anyone remember the last time we had a hosepipe ban? I could not. When, Philippa? Oh, you can't? No. Because I think it must have been... Yeah, exactly. With us hitting 38, 40 degrees, it's not okay that Anglian Water aren't putting that there as well. So I think this isn't just due to the new growth. There's an element of local responsibility that needs to be taken in this area as well.
Lovely, thank you. All right, Daniel.
Thank you very much. It's a really important question, and I'll address it absolutely directly. If we can't sort out the water issues, no, of course we shouldn't be building more houses. But the question is, can we sort out the water issues? And I believe we can. Sadly, we haven't done very well on building houses to higher standards, and I think it was a great pity that the building standards were lowered at the start of the 2010 coalition government. If you look at a lot of the housing that's been built around Cambridge, it could have been built to much higher standards. I can't remember the exact figures, but other countries managed to achieve, I think, 80 litres per person per day, and we're about 105, 110 in this country. So there's lots more we could do. Retrofitting absolutely could be part of it, although it's actually much more efficient to do it when you're building the houses initially. So we could use water more efficiently, absolutely for sure. But also, there are the much bigger issues around, such as we're very close to the fens. Now, when you look at it, we are pumping huge amounts of water out into the sea at the moment. It strikes me as slightly curious that that's immediately adjacent to a city which is struggling to build houses because it doesn't have enough water. So actually, some of our predecessors didn't take the pessimistic view that we can't do anything. They actually did stuff. They actually built stuff and actually transformed the landscape in this part of the world. So I don't think it's impossible to do. There are engineering solutions to some of this. There is water being moved from one part of the country to another. But actually, the better way of doing it is not wasting water in the first place. But if you're wondering whether this is what would actually happen, that we would say no to housing if you don't get it right, it's already been put to the test. A few months ago, rather bizarrely, the government tried to overturn its own legislation on neutrality. It took a big fight in the House of Commons and then in the House of Lords to actually get the government to stick to its own previous proposals on that. And it's roughly equivalent. Basically, it's saying that unless you do these things, you can't build, and that's the way it should be.
Thank you. David.
I think it's all a little bit contrived talking about what solutions we can bring in to allow us to grow more, like pipe water from here, put it there, put a reservoir down here. It's basically like finding ways to cope with a problem, and the problem is we need to grow Cambridge beyond what the citizens of Cambridge would like. Yeah, we just need to squeeze everything out of Cambridge, and if we're squeezing now, I think Cambridge, I'm told, generates something like £34 billion of value added per year. So if we multiply that by 4, we'll get 130-something billion. So let's try to see where we can pipe the water over for these pesky people to drink and wash themselves. And in the end, you're contriving to produce a result which isn't perhaps meant to be. You're forcing things in a way which is almost blind. You could be developing other centers of science and research and developments throughout the country and benefiting the country, rather than focus on just one winning horse, which isn't going to be a winning horse forever because we're running out of resources and our infrastructure is crumbling, our crime is rising, people are coming here looking for wealth, because Cambridge is famous for being a rich city, and they're falling into the streets because there is no wealth available, all the doors are closed. We need to think about these things first. We also need to think about us, how we strengthen our society, our communities, rather than constantly having imposed upon us the insecurity of growth, mandated from above. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, Shane, thank you.
Thank you. So I think one of the questions at the start, there was quite a lot in there, was should developments go ahead regardless whether we have enough water? I think the short answer is obviously no, and anybody who was to suggest otherwise shouldn't be taken seriously, frankly, but that doesn't mean that we don't ever go for growth or ever try to build houses in this area. As has been mentioned, we need to think long term and build the necessary infrastructure, such as the water supply from the fens, to make sure that it is possible in the future. We don't have to just think, well, if it's not possible now, it's never possible. We need to think more long term and build the infrastructure that we need for the future. And similarly, I think it was already said earlier, it's not a case of economic growth or the environment. Again, that would be an irresponsible position to take. We can achieve both, but obviously it's sensibly and sustainably. And that's why I'm proud that as part of the Conservative manifesto, we've said with regards to development, we're obviously pro-development for the reasons we mentioned. We want to build more houses to help hard-working families get on the housing ladder. But we have the important caveat that we won't do that without local support and making sure that those houses are built in the right areas. So unlike, I think, the Labour Party position, which is we're going to build regardless, we want to build, but we are very cognizant of the environment, particularly in Cambridge, that we're operating in. So we need to tread carefully, do it slowly, do it at the right pace, build the infrastructure. It's not a yes or no, it's a in time, at the right time, in the right place. But just for the last 30 seconds I have as well, despite the genuine concerns, we can't forego growth because it effectively leaves people behind. As I said earlier, the 3 ways to raise income, taxes, cuts or growth, we need growth in order to support those at the bottom of the income scale. Those who need a house, they rely on that growth. And it's easy to say, oh, we've got loads of inequality, but we don't want people here. It's an arrogant position to say build them elsewhere. If we are welcoming and we do want everybody to benefit, we need to match that with action by allowing people to live here and build the houses they need.
Thank you. All right, thank you all. All right, so we'd like to open up the...
Can I just answer some?
Of course.
To that question, which was brings the question, which is, given the comments made by the panel, do they support the Environment Agency objections that you continue to protect the environment by opposing major developments in this region until there's clear evidence there is enough water to support them? Do each member of the panel, do any of the candidates not prepared to sign the petition?
Well, can you say that again? What do we support or what do we not support?
The Environment Agency has objected to developments such as Bourne and Darwin Green on the grounds that they're not sustainable because there's not enough water. We support these objections and ask that you continue to protect the environment by opposing major developments in this region until there is clear evidence there is enough water to support them. I think having enough water is a human right issue, and the Environment Agency they are the experts. We've all talked about the fact that there's no new reservoir till 2035, no water pipe transfers until 2032. There's lots of things we can do, but we all know there's not enough water. So I want to know, are there any members of the candidates who are not prepared to sign this petition?
Would everyone be happy to sign it?
Yeah, we all. I mean,
Anybody
already signed?
Okay.
The Environment Agency. Anybody not prepared? This is the Environment Agency.
It sounds like you have...
Can I just make an observation?
Yes.
Yes.
They're all going to say something like yes, you know.
Well, the easy thing to do is say yes, but look, I'm a shadow minister at the moment who's probably, to some extent, in charge of the Environment Agency. And what we've got to do is respect the way our institutions work. And politicians intervening and pressing agencies to do particular things is not always the best way of doing things. So I'd absolutely say I agree with the principle, but if the Environment Agency is making its objections, those should stand. It's for the Environment Agency, not for... Well, it's not about whether I support it. What I'm trying to explain to you is we have a very complicated and actually I'd say rather good set of environmental laws in this country. And as a potential minister, I'm very mindful of the fact that that there will be many legal challenges. I can see Anthony nodding. What I'm trying to explain is there are different roles here, and the politician's role is slightly different. So although obviously for the purposes tonight I will say I will sign it, actually if we go down that route, we actually begin to undermine potentially the very protections we're trying to put in place. That is just my observation.
Thank you. Yep.
Does democracy count? This is the question. I've spoken to councillors, from the centre of town. You know, the Grafton Centre is being redeveloped as some sort of lab or something like that. It's the second time that area is being crushed and then rebuilt. And most of the residents are opposed to it, but the councillors are very much in favour of it. And these are the people who represent the residents. So to what extent do we represent the residents?
Wow. Big issues about what type of democracy we have.
Precisely.
Yeah. Great. So I would like to take some questions from the floor. What I'd like is to take 2 or 3 questions, and we'll try to group them. And so if I could ask maybe the first question here, and then people who have similar questions can add to it. Yes, please. And then we will group the questions around different issues. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Martin Lucas Smith. So my question is about affordability. The Conservative government has failed to tackle the historic north-south divide, leaving post-industrial areas in continued decline. This means ever more pressure in people moving to this region rather than to other post-industrial areas of the country. And so housing costs are very excessive and water stress is great. Given the problems of a city where increasingly only the rich can afford to live here unacceptably, to what extent should be there compromise or not on building on the green belt? And what other policies, e.g. investment in the north, mass council house building, etc., would you push for to really solve the problem of affordability at source?
Great. Thank you. So other questions that kind of speak to this, the issues about housing affordability, but also what broader questions in terms of regional balancing of the economy and growth that we might do. Yes, in the green there, please.
Stand up, okay.
Introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Pamela. I'm a public sector worker, and I live in Cambridge, not Cambridge City. And I work in children's mental health, children in care. Okay, thank you. So my question, approximately 1,400,000 Danes live in non-market cooperative housing. An opportunity to own your own home at affordable, capped, non-market prices, meeting the needs of people like me, not greed. Why are we wedded to developer-led or market-led housing when it hasn't and won't fix our housing crisis, as we've heard this evening? Why don't we have non-market solutions here in Cambridge?
And similar theme? Yes, is it a similar?
Good luck.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to ask a question because I think that the Crown owns a lot of land. Why is no one asking this? How much land does the Crown own? And if you want to talk about how are people going to afford it? If the Crown, this as Galloway said, put away childish things like princes and kings and queens and all this kind of thing. So surely it would be more affordable if we had a more even spread of housing and land. Also worth keeping in mind, by the way, talking about growth, because every recession since the 60s, growth has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I think there is limits to growth, obviously. Now the New York Bank of Mellon has 29 trillion in uninvested capital money. It's just sitting there. So what does that tell you about the economy right now, the world economy now? Not great, is it? Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we'll take these 3 as a group, and then we'll come back to, I do see all the hands there, so we will come back to that. So questions about housing affordability, about non-market kind of cooperative, different forms of housing, about ownership, and again, this kind of relates, does ownership matter? And is the fact that we have had kind of developer-led growth only an important issue? And going back to the first question also, are there regional implications of this? Who wants to start us off? Cheney, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, thank you both very much for all your questions. A lot to unpack. I'd say maybe we can take it in turns, so we might get to the end. I'd say there are three things I want to sort of pick out from it. First of all, about building on the green belts. And just to be clear, the Lib Dem manifesto proposes not building on the green belts, and that actually we have enough space on brownfield sites as it is. So to be clear on that answer to start with. I think a big part of the North-South divide, as someone who comes from the Midlands, which is possibly the worst of all possible options, is it's actually about connectivity. So one of the reasons so much growth and industry is centred around Cambridge is because of our connections to London, which is the capital city. It's always going to be quite important. But of course the university as well. And we have the connectivity here that people can move very easily. We can travel to Europe incredibly easily as well. One of the big challenges for the northern towns is of course making those connections. So I think a large part of solving the North-South divide is around making public transport more easy, but also making hybrid and remote working more possible as well, and different organisations being more flexible in how that works, that people don't have to necessarily work in the town that they live in. I do really agree with the point around public sector housing, and there are many other models of what we could explore rather than just market-led. Something which the Lib Dems have looked at within Cambridge, which is not the perfect answer, we decided, but I think it's worth floating, but is around the idea of key worker housing. This is something that's been trialled quite successfully in Lambeth, where they've identified a group of public sector workers where they have a real lack in the area who they want to support, and they provide housing at a third of market rent that's largely costed by the council to support that, because they recognise the value of those workers. Now, I don't think that's a perfect solution, because the challenge that many would give is, well, what about the people who you don't choose? What about everybody else? What about the affordable housing? But there are many more flexible options, and I think there should be an element here. This is why I talk about Cambridge having its own independence, to actually look at what are the issues that we face, where are the gaps we need to fill, who do we need to support. So I think flexibility is definitely possible.
Lovely, thank you. Shane.
Thank you. So I'll address the North-South divide, and you can probably tell my accent isn't particularly southern. I'm from the Northwest, and I've got to say I do resent the comment about the North continually in decline. As someone who spent most of their life there, the North isn't in decline. Yes, it's not London. Yes, it's not Cambridge, but it's perfectly great on its own, and it's doing pretty well, thanks. No, but of course, in all seriousness, we can do more, we should do more, and one of the most inspiring pledges in the 2019 manifesto by the Conservatives was the mission to level up the country. And look, again, as someone from a former mining town in the northwest of England, we've seen the benefits of levelling up. Of course, there is so much more to go, and obviously we're distracted with the COVID and the war and all the rest of it. We've all did it before. We need to go further. And it involves investing in local communities, building the infrastructure they need. Cheney mentioned transport. That is a massive issue in the north, getting from east to west rather than just how can we get to London that little bit quicker. And that's why, ironically, I support getting rid of HS2 and focusing the resources on local transport. But ultimately, again, it's about supporting those people through growth, what we were talking about before. If those economies can grow, by whether it's liberalising planning laws, whether it's encouraging investment, or whether it's by cutting people's taxes so they have more money to spend and to generate their own local economy. That's the way we do it organically. I'm not a fan of central government imposing the ways in which the North should better themselves. It's giving them the opportunities, giving them the infrastructure, empowering them to do it themselves. We don't all have to be mini Londons either. There's different ways of contributing to the UK economy. And I think too often it might upset people in the room, a southern viewpoint to say that the north is suffering, the poor north. The north's doing pretty well. Of course it can do better, but with investment, with infrastructure and with growth, it will do and can do.
Thank you. Sarah.
Okay, thank you for your questions, everybody. Martin, you were talking about affordability and the historic north-south divide. So I was really upset when Sunak cancelled phase 2 of HS2. I was looking forward to when I go home to see my family in Clitheroe, it takes 5 trains to get there, and that just seems counterproductive. And I'm really trying not to drive. So Yeah, housing costs, I mean, yeah, obviously then you've got this weird thing in Cambridge. People, my family visited me here in Cambridge and they see the housing prices, they see the price of a beer even, and it's ridiculous. So there's lots of people who come here and then they go away again for a better standard of living up north, but there's lots of people from the north that come down here for jobs as well, for technical jobs and science jobs. So we've got this very weird conundrum, but then we've got public sector workers that can't afford to live here either. So we've got the average house, to get onto the housing ladder, you need a combined salary of 85 grand. And the average pay for a nurse, a teacher, or a social worker is about £30,000. So you do the math there, they can't get on the housing ladder. And how are we going to run the schools and the hospitals? You know, I mean, at my son's school, at Morley School, I spoke to the head teacher, and she can't get the staff, never mind teaching assistants and the poor pay that they're on. How are they going to live in Cambridge? You know, a lot of them don't. They have to travel in. On what public transport? So there's so many issues here in the south that people think is so good, but it's not. It's really, really painful. So, yeah, your question over here about 1 million Danes, the cooperative housing solutions, the affordable non-market prices. Thinking outside the box, brilliant. This is what we need now. And these are solutions that are being arrived at without going down the growth route, without thinking about that and about becoming collaborative and thinking how we're going to create a better way of life. Also, we could talk about cooperative food growing as well, which is very, very important for our futures. We all need to get growing vegetables and so on. The right to roam, just quickly about the right, the Crown, I just wanted to say a Justice question about the Crown. Yeah, I mean, it's an absolute scandal in this country that most of the land is owned by the royalty, it's owned by the landowning class. Still, here in England, in Scotland, we've got the right, or the church. 92% of land.
Well, time.
Yeah. The time's out, sorry. I could go and I could rant and rant and rant. Anyway, go.
I'm sure we'll get back to that. Thank you. Khalid.
Very kind. Thank you very much. Now, we have two things. Let me go back to my childhood when I had a neighbor, and I do remember this neighbor till now. I'm his friend, you see, and I know his, we are growing together, and the other neighbor as well. We know each other. But here in Cambridge, unfortunately, my kids keep losing their neighbors because of what? It's very expensive city. So I'm here to gamble on what we call it. I call it support the original people here. You know what's happening here? Let's talk about this. We don't have sustainable citizens anymore. We have to support our local community, support them with deposit. We have to reduce the deposit for them. They managed to build 500 new houses, then they managed to sell it over China or Hong Kong. This is dangerous. We are changing the demography of our citizens, of our city. This is number one. So we need to gamble in our own citizens, support them. Now, we keep losing neighbors. They are going outside the city because of cost living. They are going outside because of the housing prices up. So there's what I call it, I used to call it like, remind me with this demographic war, what they faced in Gaza or in the Bethlehem, removing the original people and bringing other people. This is dangerous for the local community. We have to support the original people here, support them with cost of living. This is the reason why we at the Worker Party, next to my heart, you know why? We are asking the 60 billion from the NATO to come support our people because they are starving. They don't have money to pay the bills. They don't have money to face this cost of living. So we have to divert this money to support our own army, our own security, our own citizens, the students suffering, the teachers suffering. They are going abroad. 30% of our doctors going abroad. They are considering to go abroad. Already thousands every year. They are going abroad. Teachers, nursing team as well, and professionals. Why? We need to support our people, please. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
I think basically what Shani said about key worker flats is quite a good solution to the problem of affordability, at least for a large class of people. It's a good beginning. Essentially what you're doing when you do that is you have people who are providing vital services, and you provide them with a standard of living, a quality of life that is, I would say, almost on a par with the other people who are like got more money and have their own private house, etc. Include also other perks. In addition to that, make sure that that we produce an even field for people, so that people feel that even though they're not in a high-paying job, they actually can exist in a respectable and comparable way to other people. That's what I would say about the housing, for example. You want to say something?
It's not a question, it's a remark. It's all right if it's all right for everybody.
You have to begin somewhere, and so I'm answering about the key workers. Well, there's people who are not key workers. There's people who are, for example, homeless and who don't have a job. There's unemployed. There's all sorts of people. And other people who are not key workers are people who have a lot of money and can afford. We define, I suppose, key workers as people who can't afford to go on the private market and get a house. There's a lot of difference. You have to also bear in mind there's a lot of difference in the prices of houses and properties and the rents between the center of Cambridge, which is what people take as being Cambridge, and the outskirts. Obviously, there's some places you would prefer not to live in. Those places are cheaper. I mean, it's not a straightforward question to answer, but ideas such as key worker flats, community, like cooperative housing, is a good start.
Thank you. Daniel.
Thank you. Martin, you probably heard me say this before, but the regional inequality, I think, is one of the most fundamental problems this country's faced. I mean, London-centred economy, and I think that the destruction of the regional structures in 2010 was a terrible error, looking back on it. And actually, it's very rare you get a clap for that. But and as a consequence, I've chaired a cross-party group in Parliament ever since for the East of England, because I think there is something that between Westminster and local government, and I think it can make a difference. And what's extraordinary is that I think we've learned recently that the structural funds that used to come from the European Union, the government has now said that they're going to scrap that and spend it on the National Service Plan instead. Now, I think it's descent into the absurd, frankly, and I really hope that doesn't happen. But it's really hard to address regional inequalities. I think you have to just keep working on it. And in fact, probably Mia knows more than most people on how you address that kind of thing. On affordability, Pamela, I thought it was a really strong point. And I'm pleased to see in the Labour manifesto there's a strong commitment to supporting co-ops. And that will be one of the ways in which we can do it. Labour introduced key worker housing in the last Parliament. In fact, there was some in East Chesterton. I remember essentially it's for key public service workers, teachers, people working in the NHS and so on. So I think it's an important way forward. Community land trusts. I mean, partly this is about the price of land, which makes these things so difficult to do. But it can be done, and I would strongly support it. I'd also say, and we should be proud of this, that in our city, the City Council here has I think, the second highest number of council houses in the last year or two have been built. So it shows it can actually be done. Yeah, absolutely. And that helps some people. And then finally, just on the affordability thing, inflation has been a terrible... That's a trick statistic as well. Inflation has been a terrible curse in this country in the last few years, and one of the unintended things which people don't spot entirely is it's inflated rents, which means landlords play the system, and which is why we've so got to end no-fault evictions and scrap Section 21, which the government's failed to do.
Thank you. Right. So before we go to other questions, did everyone who asked a question, did you feel like it was answered there? Did we kind of we get to the heart of it? Yes.
Not entirely. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said, Daniel, but I'm sensing a lack of commitment to actually investing in those post-industrial areas. And for the record, my family actually comes from the north. I'm not in any way dissing it, but you yourself, were saying there's much more to do there. And that's what I'm saying. The fact that you have, trains Clitheroe that, we're still running on diesel engines, this is, that's what I'm saying. That if we can get the north, those post-industrial areas much more invested, more people want to live there, and it will even out the country. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not really insulted.
Can I take a question here with the lady with the striped scarf?
Please use the microphone. Thank you. It's coming. It's nearly there. I'm moving incredibly fast. Sorry,
Thank you. My name is Dr. Helen Farney. I've been a resident in Cambridge for about 50 years. And I've had children here and use the services, local services. And I just wanted to say, yes, of course, growth has been very important, because when we started living here, Cambridge was very small, and we had to go outside Cambridge to get facilities for children, and sort of there was some room for growth. That was great that it's grown, but I think it's grown a bit too much now. I don't know. It's just, it feels that there's a lot of housing and not much services have not improved. My question is specific to Daniel Zagner, only because he's been the one that has been in power. I mean, the other people in the panel, they can have visual thinking and they would like to take that position of becoming our next MP. That would be great. But my question is to yourself, because you've been in power, you've been our MP, and during past 10 years, definitely, I have seen Cambridge, in my view anyway, there's a growing amount of potholes, social services is going downhill, I don't know, council services, you know, even planning, all sorts of things, whatever I have been doing during past 50 years, it seems things have got harder, worse. Anything to do with children's services, anything to do with elderly services. And, you know, just taking things to do with traffic. I mean, you say the traffic's got really worse, but I think it's because somebody's selling these traffic lights to big companies or something, because they're growing everywhere. You're blocking a lot of side roads, which is fine for the sort of people living, you know, in the side roads, but you're even trying to block up Mill Road Bridge. You know, if I have to go from one side of the bridge to the other, I'm just saying that everything seems to be getting worse and more cluttered. It feels on purpose. My question to you is, because there's so much that seems to have got worse, my question to you is, what have you done in the past 9 years that now you want to do from now till another 5 years? Because I haven't seen anything improving in my past 50 years. That's just my personal thing.
Are there other questions about public services and things that we might group together? Did you have one, Anthony? Well,
I can't combine the questions. We just can't, you know, remember what to answer.
Is it not working for you?
Yeah, not for me. I mean, I keep saying
The
almost
problem is we only have till 8:30, and we're just starting. So, did you have a similar question? Okay. Yes, please.
And I won't just pick on Daniel, but speaking, I better be honest, I'm a county councillor. What would the candidates do to help local government have their money in such a way that they can invest, rather than the short-term money that we get at the moment, which means we can't do the pothole maintenance cycles or whatever, or employ people. Well, if you want to add in about business rates, that's fine too, because they are very related. But what plans do your parties have to make a better relationship in terms of investing in local services? Thank you.
Great. A similar question, something we can put in there? Yes.
A very quick one.
Yep.
An observation. Cambridge seems to have vanity projects, these cyclops.
Oh, no, that's an opinion.
Sorry. Cambridge is full of vanity projects. The Cyclops roundabout at Histon Road, the other one down at Addenbrooks, which cost millions and millions and millions. We've got Milton Road, GCP, a lot of this is related to. But actually, all we really need, I mean, if you cycle up Cherry Hinton Road, it's appalling. What was once very nice, with a nice cycle lane all printed out in red, is almost disintegrated. They're spending millions on vanity projects when all we need is paint, lines, and everybody would be safe, and the potholes would be, and people would actually cycle.
And then, Anthony, you wanted to throw in one more question.
I've got to film myself on this one. I'll see if I can stand a little bit. It is. I mean, very interesting set of observations, one of which I think actually reflects how little understanding collectively all of us in this room actually have about how the state functions, and in particular, what MPs can and cannot do. Daniel Zeichner cannot do a thing as an MP for Cambridge on potholes. So my question to all of you is, in terms of the future of Cambridge and improving our public services and governance systems, how are you going to ensure that we are all educated so that we can give you all informed comments, informed questions, rather than having somebody like me moaning and saying, do you all know the basic concepts of parliamentary sovereignty and the rule of law and what councils legally can do and cannot do? Because, for example, the Greater Cambridge Partnership doesn't allow money to be spent on maintaining roads. You have to spend them on projects.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we have enough for now, and then I have noted you, and I will go to you next, I promise. That would be great, Daniel. So public services, austerity, local government, investment, and how do we educate people about the structure of government and what local government versus central government can do?
What a fantastic set of questions. And let me start by addressing your point. I would love to have been in power for the last 9 or 10 years, but we're in opposition in government, and it's incredibly frustrating, and that is the difference. That's what I very much hope to be able to do, the things that we talk about over the next period. That will only happen if we get a change in government. So it goes to the heart of Anthony's point, really. Quite often you'll see MPs claiming they've done this, that, or the other, and I'm absolutely appalled, frankly, because by and large it is never going to be down to one person who's done things. It goes back to my comments at the beginning. You work with colleagues, particularly in local government, to try and achieve things. So there are things that people want to do in Cambridge, and it'll be part of my job to talk to people who've got the power in government to do it. Now, in opposition, it's much harder. It doesn't stop you trying. I mean, let me give you an example. Some people will remember the appalling destruction of Wilton Terrace some years ago. I actually ended up talking to Greg Clark, who was then the local government Secretary of State, and saying, because he knew Cambridge, and saying, please, can we not have something left for Cambridge? And he actually said, above my pay grade. And, unbelievable. But he said that he would have been chastised by his officials because he couldn't intervene in that kind of way. So it's not quite as straightforward as some of that seems. The point about, yes, I think vanity projects. Look, I want to see better infrastructure in Cambridge. I think we're the top cycling city in the country, but that's despite the infrastructure locally. So I'm very pleased to see infrastructure being improved. As I hinted earlier, I absolutely sympathise with how difficult it is to live with those changes. But frankly, the only way we're going to solve the pothole problem is not by short-term fixes, but actually doing the long-term road maintenance that should have been done years ago. That will be disruptive, unfortunately. I actually think the roundabouts are a good idea. I'm in favour of the kind of things, if you go to Walthamstow and see the Little Holland schemes, they were done properly, not short-term cheap fixes like was done here, I'm afraid, in some cases, but done properly, you can get low-traffic neighbourhoods to work and really be transformational.
Thank you. Sarah.
Sorry, Philippa. Long-term funding is in Labour's manifesto for local government, which will come as a huge relief, I think, to people in local government.
Because they've been living with year-to-year funding, which makes it very difficult to plan.
Hi. Okay, I'll keep to the time this time. Sorry, Susan. Okay, I think both the questions that you were saying before and the one about potholes, so it's all about investment, finding the money to make these things work. And the Green Party believe that we can't have Scandinavian services without Scandinavian taxes. So the super rich are going to have to pay more. And that is quite simple, really. That is how we get the funding.
So we think we should be asking the multimillionaires, the billionaires, who are the ones that have the broader shoulders, who can give the money, just 1%. We're not talking about robbing them. It's 1%, and that would go to fund the things that we need, sorting out the roads, sorting out NHS, funding how to paying key workers a fair wage, and make the conducting retrofitting programs, and all the things that we need to fix this country, all the things that we are in crisis with at the moment. Concerning vanity projects, I use Cherry Hinton Road every day. I've got my son on the back of the bike, taking him to school. I don't feel safe. I go on the pavement. It's ridiculous. It's just a bit of paint. Get it on road so we can see there's a clear cycle lane and make it consistent. There was a consultation back in 2019 that talked about intuitive bus stops and talked about cycle lanes, and it was all going to be very nice. That was back in 2019. That was 5 years ago. We're still waiting. And about excellent question about collective understanding. How do we educate ourselves more at the moment? We're in a country where we're really disempowered generally as a population because we don't have this sort of education in our schools. I got to choose politics at A level. If I could have chosen it at GCSE, I would have. I think it's terrible that kids leave school without the knowledge of what is the House of Lords and how does it work and how are we surprised that voting turnout is so low? Caroline Lucas was the first one to instigate a natural history GCSE, and I think a citizenship GCSE is very much needed. We had something similar in the 1950s. We need to bring it back. Thank you.
Thank you. It's on.
Can you hear me? Do you mind if I stand?
No,
tired
fine.
from sitting. and the clinic, it was really, really long. Now, we have two issues here. One, if you are talking about the city, I think Daniel, he didn't fight enough for better budget for the city. Really, the city getting bigger. We need stronger budget to fix the roads, the cycling community suffering. There is no lines. Everyone's struggling. The mill road here and there. The social care down. So what we need fresh blood, fresh face to fight for bigger budget from the central government. It's not just we give them, send them the money, and we get nothing here. So our people needs a stronger budget. Our city needs bigger budget. This is number one. Number two, any manifesto talking about increasing the tax on the people, this is really dangerous, because what will happen if you increase the tax for the rich people or poor people? The rich people will go to Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and I saw them. I know them. They are going abroad. They will run abroad easily. Better life, no tax, easy money. Even Sunak, he get green card to run abroad, okay, and his money abroad, okay. And some people, they got their bank account in Israel as well to run away. Now, what we need here, we need really to bring back the money from the NATO. Again, 60 billion, and we are talking about inflation and problem, we are facing problem with inflation, but 60 billion, we are struggling. There is 4.3 million children in poverty, suffering. There is big food bank, people, the queue getting longer and longer. Let's bring the money and feed our people, support our community. Any extra tax, more homeless people, more struggle, more poor family, more people running abroad. Enough. Let's stand together and stop this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David.
I don't know where to start. To talk about the vanity projects, as David pointed out, it's true that there is a lot of emphasis, usually in local government and central government, on building things that you will be remembered by, nice big things, and leaving the simple things, the boring things, which nobody will remember you by, to decay. So for example, HS2 caused a lot of trouble with the rest of the railway. You've noticed, I suppose, that there's a lot of trouble with strikes, and there's not enough money to carry out night work, so everything has to be interrupted during weekends. This is particularly strong in London, not here perhaps. So this is a trend. But I've got to admit to you, I've forgotten the other questions because you bunched them together.
Also about public services, about investing, allowing schemes to allow local scale government to invest, and also about educating the public about civics and the structure of government.
Okay, so I think one of the biggest things we can possibly do in our country is educate children and give opportunities to young people to improve their position, their certainties in life. Educating people about how Parliament works is a detail. You know, it can be taught to somebody in a few minutes. What I'm focusing on it was clear that the question aimed at Daniel was wrong. You know, he's not in power in Cambridge. Yeah, and he's in opposition. Yeah, do you know what I mean? If you vote him in, you give him power. But he's not got any power right now. But he doesn't have power. He's just an MP. He's consultancy. I know I'm against voting him, and I'd like you to vote for me. But I've got But you have to be fair. You have to be fair you have to be fair that he doesn't have a say.
It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay. Right, more or less, yeah. So what I believe in is we've got to give our youth more opportunities to turn into responsible adults. That's what I think the foundation should be, and everything else will come from this, because the youth of today are the generation of tomorrow, the adults of tomorrow, and we are failing them at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny.
Many questions. I've been trying to group them together, and I think for me the answer to all of those questions is we need a unitary authority. Currently, the way Cambridge's government works, its local government, is ridiculous. So I'm a city councillor, which I think puts me at the bottom of the pecking order. But then we also have a county council, which is slightly more important. We have a Greater Cambridge Partnership, and we don't quite know what they do. We then also have a combined authority, and no one's got a clue about that. And then on top of all of that, there is a mayor, and then this silly role called the Police and Crime Commissioner. And when you lump all of those things together, and as a city councillor at the bottom of this, you get the brunt of it. When a resident says to you, there's a massive pothole here, can you sort it out? And you have to say no, because it's one of any 4 people, depending on where exactly your pothole is and which verge it's on. And it is ridiculous. It's bureaucratic. It's ridiculously confusing, which I think ties into the education point around how are people expected to know. It's also incredibly expensive because there is so much duplication there within the roles. That also means these big projects take so long because there are so many different organisations there who don't necessarily sync together very well. I think a city of the size that Cambridge is now should be ripe for a unitary authority, which would mean we have one layer of government across the piece. And that would start to give you the economy of scale that I think links slightly to your question, Philippa. Just the other point to make around it as well in terms of local government finances, part of it does come from the government, but one of the biggest drains on the county council at the moment is within social care, and it's a drain across our whole society. I'm incredibly proud of the Liberal Democrats' proposals to properly reform social care, and so to actually really elevate the role of carers, to pay a proper carers allowance, and to make sure we return the value of social care to the community, so that many of those issues which then become big problems down the line when people enter hospital and need support in their homes can be addressed much earlier. So I think there's a big role to play there in terms of the social care also.
Thank you. Shane.
So the first question rightly highlighted that local council services have been declining, and that question was asked of the Labour MP, and was rightly pointed out that the Labour MP can't do anything about these issues, but the Labour-run council can do. For the last 30 years, the council has been run by the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, and they've failed. I've spoken to hundreds of people across the city who tell me that they don't think their voices are being listened to. They think their views and their priorities don't get taken into account in decision making. And frankly, many of them think their votes are being taken for granted. And I think, sadly, they are right in lots of ways. You know, David mentioned vanity projects. It's so obvious. Like, they're not people's priorities. They're ideologically driven pet projects, which ultimately only hurt hard-working people who don't care about a Cyclops roundabout. They just want to get to work. And you can cycle without needing a Cyclops roundabout, frankly. But there was a question about how we can get more money to local government, and I agree. I mean, there's 2 things to that. One example, I mentioned HS2 being scrapped before and putting money into local services. That's an easy one. But we talked about it a few times. Growth. It's not always popular, but that's how you pay for more local services. And then the fourth question about education, fantastic. I've been advocating that since I got into politics. The level of education for young people is poor, frankly, when it comes to politics. And it's already been touched on. I can't believe I'm now agreeing with the Lib Dem candidate that we basically need to simplify local government. It's far too complicated. I think most of us here, it's probably fair to say, are a little bit obsessed by politics. We all love it. We're all a bit geeks. And I still struggle to understand how the mechanisms of government work in Cambridge. And if we're struggling, how can people who are new to politics get their head around it? So absolutely, let's bring it in.
The problem is, Shane, it was your party government that did it.
Okay, so I'm going to go over time to answer that question. Absolutely agree. I am the Conservative Party candidate, but I'm not going to stand here and say every single thing we've done in 14 years is perfect. That was a mistake. we can laugh, but surely we want politicians who are open and honest and transparent rather than just spouting a party line, right? I agree. Obviously, the idea of it was to give more power to local people to decide how their own areas are run rather than be done centrally. But I think particularly in Cambridge, that's gone far too far. And the GCP, frankly, is a nonsense.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think we'll take another round of questions. As someone who works on austerity, I'm quite actually interested that no one mentioned kind of 14 years of local government austerity, because local government has really taken the brunt of that. Anyhow.
If growth was successful, why have services got worse?
Did everyone who asked questions there feel that they were responded to?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Good. Great. Okay. I have the lady in the green back there who has been waving for half an hour now.
Hold on, here I come.
Very important that every word. I'm here to talk about the relocation of the sewage plant. And this is Safe Honey Hill versus Anglian Water round 3, because I have attended 3 hustings. And at all of them, the answer to why Cambridge's sewage plant needs to be relocated is housing. So before that answer comes, I'm just going to make sure everybody fully understands all the facts, because I think that's quite important. This is Anglian Water. They are, surprise, surprise, putting profit before people, and they are going to be receiving, supported by our local councils, it's going to cost £400 million to relocate the sewage plant, but it's going to cost £277 million from money for housing to move the sewage plant, which is fully functioning and future-proofed, to Honey Hill, and it's going to be built on a principal chalk aquifer. It's going to be the size of Wembley. It's going to be a tunnel going under the River Cam to pump the sewage uphill, etc., etc. Masses and masses of crazy amounts of carbon in the name of housing. So when we put this point, the response has been, it's for housing for our young people. Well, I'm afraid to say that is absolutely not true. This development, which will take place on the land that will be freed up by this appallingly relocation, money going to Anglian Water. Oh, should we be paying them twice? We're already paying them. Why are we paying them again for another sewage plant? This land is going to be used for a commercially led development. There will only be, by 2041, 3,250 houses built. But first of all, before that, the commercial and the R&D area...
There won't be time for people to respond. Please
okay, so
wrap up the
I just want to
question.
say the commercial area is the priority, and it's going to lead up to a maximum of nearly, potentially 60,000 jobs. And so there'll be a massive housing shortage. So my question is, please, is it right that we should be paying Anglian Water to our candidates again to be building another sewage plant when we're already paying them through our water bills? Thank you very much.
The woman in the rust shirt there.
My name is Anne, and I'm a swimmer, and I want to know what each of these parties is going to do to stop the shit in the River Cam. I want to
Sorry to interrupt your shit flow.
I want to know how you're going to make the water companies accountable. How are you going to make the water companies accountable for the lack of investment in infrastructure, which leads to huge amounts of water being wasted through leaky pipes, and the constant discharging of shit into our rivers and the sea everywhere.
Thank you. We're going to take one question here and one question there as well. The question in the back there, yes, please.
Where was that? Okay. No, I can jump.
I think it helps the... Excellent.
There you go.
Hi, my name's Rahman. I'm from Cambridge City Food Bank. Some of your parties have pledged to build more social housing. At the Food Bank, we are seeing a growing number of social housing tenants come to us having faced the extremely adverse effects of mismanagement and disrepair in social housing. Mold, leaks, poor insulation, poor treatment from social landlords. This disrepair and poor treatment can exacerbate or cause illness, increase financial hardship, weaken our communities, and in the worst cases, force tenants into homelessness. What will you do to ensure that everyone can have a home that is safe and habitable, especially those on the lowest incomes who are living in subpar social housing right now?
Great, thank you.
I'm John. It's just a very quick point. 9 years ago, I sat through another hustings about housing, and there was lots of talk on how people would solve the housing issues. I've just observed that in 9 years, growth has not solved any housing problems.
Okay, let's quickly move to that. So we have the issue about Honey Hill. Did you have something that is... Well, throw it out and let's see if we can't squeeze it in.
No. A quote from Bertolt Brecht, this is actually put into much simpler. A quote from Bertolt Brecht: "The government is disappointed in the people. Maybe they should elect a new people." Because the government and people that are going to go into government are not listening to the people. And one of the things that concerns me is one issue, the elephant in the room as far as I'm concerned, is what's going on in Gaza and the fact that Cambridge is complicit in terms of the university's funding research, in terms of firms that are funding the war in Gaza, but also because Cambridge has a history of being a city of sanctuary. You know, from the time of the Spanish Civil War, when Cambridge took in young children, to the Vietnamese War, and we took in boat people, and then Ukrainians, which we opened the doors to and provided access to, but we don't have the same attitude towards Palestinians. So I would like to ask if all of the people on the platform believe that it is now essential to call for an immediate ceasefire.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions and we don't have a lot of time, and I know some people have to leave very soon. So, Daniel, I know you have to leave at 8:30. Would you like to start us off, though? If you do have to leave, then you can.
Yeah, very quickly. Look, the Honey Hill question I answered last week, and I stand by my answer from last week. I think it's important that the development goes ahead, and I support the councils in that. On the River Cam, absolutely. Labour's proposals are very strong. We'll be fining those bosses. There'll be automatic fines for when they do the spills. This is a consequence, I'm afraid, of years of mismanagement and underinvestment, and I really genuinely think we can crack it with the water companies. So keep up the pressure. Keep up the pressure. No, I don't. I don't. Well, look, there was some arguments over parliamentary procedure, and Anthony and I perhaps can pursue that later with you. But on the food bank and the social housing question, you're absolutely right. I mean, as an MP, I get lots of people coming to me, and there's real variation in terms of the quality of the social housing providers. I'm deeply disappointed at the way in which local housing associations, they've lost, in a lot of cases, their local links and have been taken over by much bigger organisations who are much harder to hold to account. That is a complicated set of issues, but you're absolutely right to identify them, and we'll be working really hard to make sure that those really awful conditions that some people are suffering are not allowed to continue. On the housing issues, John, you say nothing's improved. Well, look, some people are living in houses in Cambridge which have been built in the last decade, and you know that, regardless of whatever we feel, that is a fact. But we need to do much better, and quite clearly the housing issues are one of the biggest things that we face. And on Gaza, look, absolutely. I would say that as a city of sanctuary, I can guarantee you that the Labour government will take a different attitude to refugees, will scrap the stupid Rwanda scheme, and which absolutely should be scrapped, and absolutely an immediate ceasefire, absolutely the hostages should be released, absolutely needs to be reconstruction in Gaza, but most of all there needs to be a proper settlement which recognises a two-state solution, because that's going to be the only long-term solution to this tragedy. And finally, because I'm going to have to go in a minute, I think the point about we have failed to explain to people the point Anthony made about how our system works effectively. It's really important that people understand. And my offer to you is, should I be fortunate enough to be re-elected, that I've had people come to visit Parliament before, and they've often gone away and said, I had no idea it worked like that. And my offer to the various organisations here is, if you want to bring groups to Parliament, I'll always be pleased to see you. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks. Katie, you want to go next?
Thank you. So we have 2 minutes and a lot of big issues. I also answered the question on Hartree last week, and my answer hasn't changed over the course of a week. I'd also rather that we spent the time to talk about issues facing Cambridge, and I think the question around Honey Hill, that's not in Cambridge, so it might be a question for your own MP candidates going forwards. But it's the question about the housing was also the one I answered last week. In terms of water and the River Cam and the sewage, the Liberal Democrats were actually the first to make sewage a national issue. We were the first to say that we should scrap Ofwats, we should put strong fines on water companies for dumping their sewage, and we should completely revamp Ofwat to make it be a public benefit corporation. It was our amendment that unfortunately Labour voted against, which I'm absolutely flabbergasted by. On the social housing, this is a key issue in Cambridge, and within our council housing, I do agree with Daniel actually that the amount of council house building that's happened by the Labour Council is impressive, but what I think they've been very poor at is maintaining the housing stock that they currently have, a lot of which is very old. It's also absolutely ridden with mould, and I see across my ward where we don't have huge amounts of council housing, but the small amount that we do is in incredibly poor condition. We've really challenged the Labour Council, I'm speaking more as a councillor here, I suppose an MP candidate, to have proper inspections of damp and moulds, and also to make sure they're out of hours, because currently the council will only go to inspect between 9 and 5, which if you're at work obviously isn't particularly convenient. So there's a lot I think we can do there to make that process much, much better. In terms of the situation in Gaza, and I'm sorry we're sort of rushing through what is such a serious issue, the devastation that we've seen unfold is horrific, and you're quite right that Cambridge and the UK is culpable in many ways, and we can't sit here and wash our hands and say, oh, it's all happening over there. Our party also supports calls for a ceasefire. I think we're also the first party to demand stopping ascending. Were we not? Oh, apologies. But we also support calls for a ceasefire and to stop selling offensive arms to Israel and to oppose sanctions on the far-right Israeli ministers. And I think we've been crystal clear on that, and I hope we've been clear on that from the start. In terms of refugees, for me, the moment that the government opens up a resettlement scheme, then that should be made available here in Cambridge. We have a strong tradition as a city of sanctuary, and that should be made available going forwards.
Sarah, you want to go next? Thank you.
Hi. Okay, so thank you, Liz. I have to commend you on your excellent campaigning skills. It's brilliant, and the Greens have really enjoyed singing with your campaign last year. Is this on? I'm not very good at this.
Just don't.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. The relocation of the sewage plant onto a green belt in 2024 amongst a climate crisis, what's going on, and all in the aid of housing and growth. I mean, there's a theme here. I'm sure everybody must go away tonight just thinking about that if you haven't. I'm sure some of us already have given deep thought to this, but really everyone in this room, you need to sort of look at your ideas about growth, particularly these people around the table. 2021, from 2011 to 2021, there were 30,000 houses built in Cambridgeshire. 30,000 is one of the fastest growing regions in the UK. And we haven't seen that average house price come down. Isn't that the whole point about growth, about making things more affordable? It's just, it's getting up more homes that people can't afford, and also more homes that are putting our water supply at risk. So building on the green belt, this is ridiculous. Cambridge already has 53,000 houses. It's tiny and it's full to the brim. Okay, in terms of social housing. Okay, social housing, the council has not been building social housing at social rents. They've been building council houses and they've been palming them off as affordable housing. And affordable rents are 80% of market rent. Okay, that's not affordable. Okay, social rents are 40% in Cambridge City Council. So these are the sort of houses that we need to be building. Over a 10-year period, the council has built a total of 113 social rented houses. Okay, that's the truth. Okay, and that's why it's still so difficult for people on low incomes to survive in this city. The fecal matter in the river. Yeah, I won't let my son. I used to, when it was really hot. Oh, and it's hot well, it was not this summer, but it's been very, very hot the last few summers. I have not gone to the river and refreshed myself with my son because of precisely that. I will not go anywhere near the river now. We used to go to the Wash. So the Green Party would bring the water companies back into public hands, and this is where they need to be, and this is how we can. And this is where they need to be, because it's absolutely ridiculous. Just finally, thank you very much for bringing up the question of Gaza. We were the first party to declare to ask for a ceasefire, permanent and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. We believe in the security and equality for Israelis and Palestinians, and we believe that war crimes should have been prosecuted, and we believe that South Africa's accusation about Israel have committed genocide in its killing of tens of thousands, the horror that we've witnessed with the killing of Palestinians. We believe that should be looked at as the Green Party. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. Shane, and then Khalid and David.
Okay, thank you for all those questions. That's a lot to try and answer in 2 minutes. I mean, the first three questions I kind of threaded together on my piece of paper here with the word disgusting. The first one about Honey Hill, I said it last week, I'll say it again, and I said it earlier actually. The Labour and Lib Dem Council don't listen to people's concerns, and you've seen that already. They're not interested in your worries and your valid concerns about this. I said it last week, I'll say it again. It's an absolute joke that they're doing that. It's disgusting, frankly, and I think it's nonsense. The second point about the other disgusting stuff in the river that you mentioned, I totally agree. It's embarrassing, it's disgusting, it should never have happened. But we have to also acknowledge, and this isn't a cop-out, this has been going on for decades. It's not a Conservative thing, it's not a Labour thing, it's been going on for far too long. But what the Conservative government have done is put more monitoring in place, imposed bigger fines on executives, banned bonuses for those executives, beefed up the regulator to try and address this issue. And the third issue then was about social housing. Again, disgusting, the way some landlords treat their residents. I don't know if many people here have ever lived in social housing. I have family lived in social housing. I have. And frankly, the state of some of these places is a joke. So we need to, first of all, make sure there's better design standards to avoid these things happening in the first place. But when we do get rogue landlords, like we've seen in the example cited, we need to come down on them like a ton of bricks. It's absolutely unacceptable. And frankly, it gives a bad name to other landlords which aren't nefarious like that. The fourth one about growth, not helping anybody with housing. The second time I'm back in Daniel Zeichner with this question, that I think those who have bought the houses would say they've probably benefited from more houses in the area. And then the fourth issue, I mean, the lady started with the sentence that the people who are elected aren't listening to you. I've mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. I totally agree. They're not listening to you. They don't care. They'll do what suits them. And on the Gaza issue, I've got 4 seconds for an incredibly nuanced issue, which I will never do justice to. Any civilian life that's lost as part of any conflict is one too many. But I generally support the government's position, which has been cautious, recognising our allies, but also recognising the humanitarian effects that are going on there. And I think we need to really tread carefully when we throw out big statements on such a nuanced issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Now, again, I have to stand. Thank you. Now, a few points about, let's start with the river. The river, I agree with you completely. I'm oncologist, I'm doctor. The river have to be clean. There is no option. And I can say the Labour Party failed completely over 9 years to think about doing anything. I consider it, if I'm in somewhere else, I would call it a crime against environment. Imagine Daniel is a minister, the shadow minister of environment. Please, this is really dangerous. We have to question this, and I'm going to question it if I'm your MB. Number 2, about the housing and the social housing, exactly the same thing. The patients, more patients, they became more sick. They have lung problems, they have breathing difficulty, they have skin problems because of this poor quality social houses. I agree with you. This is the reason why we have to sort this matter urgent. As well, about your area, last week we spoke and I told you 100% I'm with you. We should not ignore it. We should not dump our sewage to your area. This is not fair. I am with the green belt, I'm with the environment 100%, not just by name or title. This is our life, our planet, our country. So here we are. About John, about the housing, completely I'm with you. Nothing done, just more expensive houses, not for our citizens, not for our people. Gaza, we have 30 seconds, not 4 seconds by the conservative or just talking. Daniel, did you write anything in your website or Twitter about Gaza, about the genocide, about the crime? I have 18 seconds. Why you voted to continue this war against my people? My dad from Gaza. This always with me. This is life. Kids, they cutting them, destroying them, ethnic cleansing. It's not fair. We have to stand for our humanity, our British values. I will not agree to continue this dirty war against poor children and families. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David.
First of all, about the sewage works being moved, it sounds ridiculous. But I don't know the facts of why they want to move it. And nobody seems to know the facts. Right. So I mean, it sounds ridiculous. City Council okay.
Partnering Anglian Water. The Labour-controlled City Council is a partner of Anglian Water to shift the sewage works from the north of Cambridge out to Horning City.
Okay, but
and you know, weird that I should have to say that from the floor, and that hasn't come out from the panel.
Yeah, sorry, but probably some of the people here haven't thought about all the details about everything. It's better that you inform us.
Of course.
You know, that's the whole point.
It's lovely to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you. So yeah, it does sound ridiculous. Yeah, and it also to me it sounds almost as if we don't want to build housing on the green belt, so let's put this on the green belt and build the housing on the grey belt. The commercial, etc. Yeah. So I mean, it does sound like it's a little bit of like shifting things around for political reasons. But I'm not an expert. I'll leave it to you guys to fill in. All right. The second thing, housing associations merging together and being taken over by other housing associations. I've heard this before. Yeah, and people are complaining because before it was easy to talk to your housing association, but now you can't because it's somebody in London who's taken over somebody else, who's taken over somebody else. It's a whole chain, yeah? So nobody's responsible. Effectively, business is seeping into an area which is sort of a gray area, should be a social area, right? So this is what to do about this, I don't know. Maybe stronger rules against takeovers of housing associations. Housing associations tend to merge. They tend to merge on the continent, they tend to merge here. I don't think it's a very good thing for the tenants. I don't think it helps them at all. And basically, the time it takes for them to respond. Oops. And so I would like to agree with what my colleagues have said about the rest, because I'm out of time. Apologies.
Great, thank you. Right. We need to, I feel like we're just getting going, but we do need to bring the evening to a close. But I want to thank everyone who has come up here. It's a tough thing to bare yourself to the public and take on the questions, and I thank you all for doing it. And I want to also thank Wendy and Susan for organizing tonight wonderfully. And thank you. Thanks very much. And thank you to everyone who has come tonight. It really, it's only through you being here and as we started to say in the beginning, hustings are so important. It's such a rare example when we actually get to talk and debate ideas like this. So thank you all for coming. Anthony, did you have something to add?
Yes. On your way out, ladies and gents, there is an exit poll on the board, and what it asks is to what extent were your opinions on the choice that you may make when you vote been affected by the events and what you've heard this evening. So you've got 4 choices, and I'm asking you to pick one. So either you came in today knowing which way you were going to vote and your opinion hasn't changed. So, for example, you might be a member of a political party and you're here to support your candidate. 2, you haven't listened to everyone and you still haven't decided which way you were going to vote and you didn't know which way you were going to vote before you came in. 3, you thought you knew who you were going to vote for, but a strong performance by 1 or 2 of the candidates may have changed your mind. Or the final one, you didn't know who you were going to vote for, but you've been really impressed by 1 or 2 of the candidates and you may have made up your mind. This tells the organisers whether it's worth putting on these sorts of events to see if you find them useful or not. Will the result be public?
Thank you. Yes. Daniel,
and please
so
come to our River Rights Festival on Friday. 4 choirs, 3 bands, Jesus Green, between the Lock and the tennis courts. It'll be a lovely afternoon and evening.